The Texas Panhandle was a skillet, and the heat was a physical weight. Eliza Bishop hadn't seen another soul in 2 days, and she liked it that way. But the sound that cut through the shimmering air wasn't a coyote, and it wasn't a hawk. It was a baby. She found it tucked behind a boulder, wrapped in a Comanche cradle board. Its face was red, its cries thin and desperate. She knew the rules. Don't touch it. To take it was to invite a war party. To leave it was to sentence it to death. Holding the crying baby, she looked at the sun. She had hours, maybe less. She made a choice that would tear her world apart. Dust coated everything. It was in Eliza Bishop's lungs, a permanent grit in her teeth, and a fine reddish-brown shroud over her split leather skirt. At 19, she had already buried her mother, her father, and her younger brother, not in a proper graveyard, but in the unyielding dirt behind the sod dugout they had called home. Now, she was the sole occupant of that home, situated a dangerous 2 miles from the dubious safety of Prosperity Creek, the settlement that had drawn them west, with lies of green valleys and easy living. The settlement, run by the iron-willed Silas Croft, barely tolerated her. She was the woman who had survived when her family hadn't, the woman who preferred tracking and herbs to quilting bees, the woman who lived alone. In their eyes, she was either touched by madness or touched by sin. She was checking her rabbit snares near the dry arroyo when the sound reached her. It was thin, a high-pitched wail that the wind almost stole. Her hand snapped to the handle of the skinning knife at her belt. Her eyes scanned the ridges. Apaches didn't wail. Comanche war parties were loud, but this was the sound of pure misery. She moved low, following the sound against the wind, her rifle balanced in her other hand. She crept around a knot of prickly pear cactus and sandstone boulders, and her breath hitched. There, shaded by a meager overhang, was a cradle board. It was intricately beaded, Comanche work, beautiful and terrifying, and inside it, a baby. Its skin was darker than her own, but not as dark as she'd expected. Its face was screwed into a mask of anguish, tiny fists balled up. It was alone, utterly and completely alone. Eliza swept the horizon. Nothing. No horses, no warriors, no grieving mother. Just the oppressive, silent heat, and this one, desperate sound. This was a trap. It had to be. A bait baby, left to draw out a compassionate or foolish settler for an ambush. She'd heard the stories from Jebediah Stone, Croft's lead tracker, a man whose eyes were as empty as his whiskey flask. She waited. She counted to 500, her gaze never leaving the shimmering horizon. The baby's cries weakened, turning into hitched, gasping sobs. It was dehydrating. It was dying. "Damn it," she whispered, the word stolen by the wind. A trap. But what if it wasn't? What if a mother had been killed? What if she'd been taken, forced to leave her child behind, hoping a predator would find it before the elements? Eliza knew the code of the prairie. Mind your own. She knew the rules of Silas Croft. Any Indian sign was to be reported immediately. Any interaction was treason. Croft was a man who spoke of manifest destiny as a holy war, a man who saw the plains as a blank slate to be cleansed. He would see this child as vermin. The baby's cry was now just a pained whimper. Eliza's resolve cracked. Her mother, before the fever took her, had taught her that humanity wasn't a set of rules, but a feeling in the gut. Right now, her gut was screaming. "You're going to get me killed, little one," she murmured. She broke from cover, scanned the rocks above one last time, and then snatched the cradle board. The baby was heavier than she expected. She didn't run back toward Prosperity Creek. She ran toward her dugout, the one place that was hers, the one place the settlers avoided. As she ran, the baby's whimpers quieted, its dark eyes fluttering open to stare at her face, which was streaked with sweat and grime. She didn't look back, but she felt them. Eyes. She felt 1,000 unseen eyes boring into her back from the ridges. She didn't know if it was paranoia or the truth. On the panhandle, they were often the same thing. She reached her dugout, a low structure built into the side of a small hill, its front faced with rough-cut timber and mud. She barred the heavy door, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard it hurt. She laid the cradleboard on her cot. The baby had fallen into a fitful, feverish sleep. Its skin was hot to the touch. She gently unwrapped the child from its leather bindings. It was a boy. Tucked inside the furs lining the board was a small, worn leather pouch. Her fingers, stained with plant juice and animal blood, fumbled with the drawstring. Inside wasn't a tribal token. It was a locket. A tarnished, silver locket of European design. Her blood went cold. She forced the clasp open with her thumbnail. Inside there was no miniature portrait. Instead, there was a tiny, intricately folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It was a map. A crude but precise map of the valley, showing the fork of the Red River, and circled in faded ink the one thing more valuable than gold in this land, the Sweetwater Spring, the very spring that Prosperity Creek depended on. And scrawled beneath it, in shaky English script, was a name. Sarah. This baby wasn't just Comanche. This baby was half white. And this locket, this was a secret someone had died for. As this realization settled, the baby began to cry again, a weak, feverish sound that clawed at her conscience. She was no longer just a woman who had found a baby. She was a woman holding a treasure map, a target, and a death sentence. Eliza's dugout was her fortress. It smelled of dried sage, rosemary, and the metallic tang of the traps she stored by the door. Her mother had been a healer, an herbalist, and she had taught Eliza everything. While the women of Prosperity Creek traded gossip over flour sacks, Eliza had been learning which roots broke a fever and which leaves poulticed a wound. It was a skill that made the settlers distrust her, even as they sometimes came knocking at her door in the dead of night, desperate for her remedies. Now she put that skill to use. The baby, this little Adam as she'd started to call him in her head, it seemed a strong, simple name, was sick. He wasn't just dehydrated. A fever was burning him from the inside. She lit her small stove, boiling water. She crushed willow bark for the fever and mixed a thin paste of arrowroot and water, a precious resource she had to fetch from the spring itself. She dripped the cooled willow tea into the baby's mouth with a piece of clean rag. He fussed, but he swallowed. She bathed his small, hot body with cool water. As she worked, she studied him. He had his mother's, Sarah's, lighter skin, but his hair was thick and black, his eyes almond-shaped. He was a perfect tiny bridge between two worlds that wanted only to destroy each other. The locket and map she had tied on a string around her own neck, hidden beneath her linen shirt. It felt like a stone, heavy with implication. Silas Croft needed that spring. He controlled the settlement by controlling the water. This map, this deed, it challenged his power. If Sarah was a white woman, this map might even be legal in a Texas court, provided one could be found that wasn't in Croft's pocket. Hours passed. The sun reached its zenith, turning the dugout into an oven. Adam's fever spiked. He was convulsing, a terrifying, silent tremor that shook his small frame. Eliza worked frantically, her shirt soaked with sweat. She had one last resort. A tincture of datura, poison in large doses, but a miracle in small ones, to stop the seizures. She measured the drops with a shaking hand, prayed to a god she wasn't sure she believed in anymore, and administered it. The baby's tremors stilled. His breathing, which had been shallow and fast, deepened. He fell into a true, healing sleep. Eliza slumped against the wall, utterly spent. That's when she heard the horses. Her blood turned to ice. She scrambled to her rifle and peered through a small, carved-out peephole in her door. 2 riders. She didn't need to see their faces clearly to know who they were. The broad, imposing frame of Silas Croft and the wiry, hunched figure of Jebediah Stone. They weren't coming to her dugout. They were on the ridge above, the one she had scanned just hours before. They were pointing, tracking. She went this way. Jebediah's voice drifted down, thin and reedy. Saw the tracks, small boot print, headed back toward the dugout. The bishop girl? Croft's voice was a low rumble of contempt. What business does she have out here? She's a curse on this valley. Should have run her out with the rest of the squatters. Maybe she saw something. The tracks I was following. They was fresh, shod horse, running hard, and something else. Comanche? No, Jebediah said, and a chill prickled Eliza's skin. White woman. Small, light. But she weren't from the settlement. I'd know her tracks. She was running from something, headed toward the high pass. Then the tracks stopped. Found this. There was a pause. Eliza pressed her eye closer. She saw Jebediah hand something to Croft. A piece of fabric, a scrap of calico, stained dark. Blood, Croft said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. And the tracks of unshod ponies after. Comanche got her, Jebediah stated. Must have been a small scouting party. They got her and, well, there was baby tracks too, but they just disappeared, like it was snatched up. Can't find 'em anywhere. The bishop girl, Croft mused, his voice dangerously soft. You think She's strange, Mr. Croft, but she ain't stupid. She wouldn't pick up a stray, savage or otherwise. Eliza held her breath. Adam was silent, sleeping. If he cried now, they would hear. They would come. It doesn't matter, Croft said finally, turning his horse. The woman is gone. That's the important thing. The problem is solved. Let's get back. I'm posting guards at the spring. No one, and I mean no one, goes near it without my word. Especially not that bishop witch. They rode off. Eliza waited until their dust was a mile away before she allowed herself to breathe. The problem is solved. What problem? A white woman, not from the settlement, running, killed by Comanche. But Croft sounded, relieved. Her eyes went to the map around her neck. Sarah, a white woman, the owner of the spring. It wasn't a Comanche scouting party. Croft had been hunting her. Jebediah had been tracking her. They hadn't expected the Comanche to show up and clean up their mess. But what about the baby? They didn't know about the baby or the locket. A new terror seized her. They hadn't found the baby, which meant the mother, Sarah, must have hidden him before she was caught. She had hidden her son, hoping someone, anyone, would find him. Eliza looked at the sleeping child, his face calm for the first time. Your mother was a ghost, Adam, she whispered, and she was running from the same men who want me gone. She spent the rest of the day fortifying her home. She barred the door and the small window shutter. She had food and water for a few days. She would wait. But wait for what? For Croft to come back? For the baby's family to come looking? As the sun began to dip, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple, she knew she couldn't stay. Croft was suspicious. He'd be back. Her only safety lay in movement. But where? She couldn't go to Prosperity Creek. They would hang her. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't go east. She looked west, toward the high plains, toward Comanche area, a place of certain death. As if summoned by the thought, a new sound came. Not a horse, not a cry, a soft scrape. Someone was outside her door. She grabbed her rifle, her knuckles white. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice betraying a tremor. There was no answer, just silence. And then a shadow fell across the peephole, blocking the last of the twilight. The moon was beginning to rise. The shadow wasn't Croft. It wasn't Jebediah. It was someone else. Someone watching, waiting. The shadow on the ridge had moved to her door. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Eliza aimed her rifle at the door, her breathing shallow. The baby, Adam, stirred in his sleep, a small, trusting sound that amplified the menace outside. The shadow at the peephole moved, and then a voice spoke, low and resonant, in a language she didn't understand. It was not the harsh guttural she'd heard settlers mimic. It was flowing, almost musical. After a moment, the voice tried again. "I speak English. You have my son." Eliza's heart felt like it would burst from her chest. It wasn't a war party. It was one man, the father. "He is sick," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm a healer. I'm helping him." Another long pause. The bar on her door was heavy oak, but it felt like kindling. "Open," the man said. It was not a request. "I will not," she countered, pressing her eye back to the peephole. She could just make out his silhouette against the rising moon. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and held no weapon she could see, but that meant nothing. He was Comanche. "I saw from the ridge. You took him. Not settlers." "The settlers would have killed him," she said, the words sharp. "They are coming. The men who were hunting his mother." This seemed to give him pause. The shadow didn't move. "My wife," he said, and the word was heavy with a grief that needed no translation. "She is gone?" I think so. I heard men talking. They found blood." A sound came from the man, a low groan of such profound anguish that Eliza flinched. He wasn't a warrior in this moment. He was a widower. "They track her," he said, his English broken but clear. "White men. From the town. I follow. Too late. She hide him. Good. Smart. She hide him from them. And from me." "Why from you?" "We argued. I tell her, stay, safe, in the Numunu Tekwa, my people's house. She say, no, she must fix, for him." He gestured, a shadow against the door. "For Adam," Eliza gasped. You named him Adam?" "She named him. For her father." "I am Taveta. Taveta. He had a name. This changed everything." "The fever," Eliza said, her mind racing. "He was dying. I gave him willow bark and datura. I stopped the seizures. He is sleeping. He is safe. For now." "Croft," she added, taking a risk. "Silas Croft. He was one of the men. He was glad she was gone." The silence outside was now charged, no longer patient, but filled with a simmering, volcanic rage. When Taveta spoke again, his voice was different, harder. "Moon is high," he said. "They will come back. For you. And for this." He knew. He knew she had the locket. "How?" she whispered. "She tell me the map. Her paper. It keep the water. For him. For my people. Croft, her brother. He want it." Eliza's world tilted. Silas Croft. The problem was his own sister. He had hunted his own blood, Sarah Croft, because she had married a Comanche, because she held the deed to the spring he needed to rule his little Dust Bowl kingdom. And this man, Taveta, was her husband. The baby, Adam, was Croft's nephew. "Let me in," Taveta said. "Or we both die here." Eliza looked at the sleeping baby. She looked at the barred door. She was trapped between two mortal enemies, but one of those enemies had murdered his own sister and would just as easily murder a baby. The other was a grieving father. Slowly, her hands shaking, she uncocked the rifle and leaned it against the wall. She lifted the heavy oaken bar. The door creaked open. Taveta filled the frame. He was magnificent and terrifying. Dressed in simple buckskin leggings and a breechcloth, his chest was bare, scarred. His hair was in 2 long braids, and his eyes in the moonlight were black and filled with an unbearable pain. He looked past her, his gaze landing instantly on the cot. He moved inside, silent as smoke, and knelt by the baby. He touched Adam's cheek with one finger, his hand, which could surely snap her neck, impossibly gentle. A tear tracked through the ritual paint on his cheek. He looked at the small vials of herbs, the mortar and pestle, the clean rags. He saw her work. He stood, turning to face her. He was a foot taller than her, a wall of muscle and grief. "You saved him," Taveta said. I tried. The fever is broken, but he's weak. My people are sick. The white man's coughing sickness. It takes the children, the old, our puha, our medicine is not strong. Your medicine is strong." He looked at her, a direct, unnerving gaze that seemed to peel her open, to see the spine of her, the core. "You have no people," he stated. "Croft will kill you for the map and for this." He gestured to the baby and then to himself. "For helping us." "I know," she said, lifting her chin. "You, come with me," he said. It wasn't a question. "You, be mother to Adam." Eliza recoiled. "Be his... What? He need... Mother, my son, need... you." He saw her expression, the fear, the misunderstanding. He struggled for the words. "You, keep him safe. You, heal my people." He reached out, not to touch her, but to the locket that was a lump beneath her shirt. He didn't take it. "You, keep this. It is yours. You are his mother. Now." He took a deep breath, and the moonlight caught the silver of his tears. "At Moonrise, I ask this. You be my wife." Eliza's mind reeled. This wasn't a proposal of love. It was a bargain, a desperate, brutal, political bargain. He was offering her protection, a place, a purpose, in exchange for her knowledge, her medicine. In his world, a motherless child was doomed. A skilled healer was a treasure. He was binding her to him, to his son, with the only vow he knew. He was asking her to trade her life, her world, her identity for survival. She started. "No, wife, like Sarah," he said quickly, as if reading her mind. "A Noia, a partner. You heal, I protect. We save Adam, we save the water." It was the most terrifying, and, in that moment, the safest offer she had ever received. "I am not your wife, Taveta," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I am Adam's healer, and I will be your people's healer, if you will have me." He nodded, a sharp, quick motion. "It is enough. We go now, before stone cuts our tracks." He scooped up the cradle board, strapping it to his own back, his movements economical and precise. He grabbed her rifle and handed it to her. "Bring your puha," he said, pointing to her herbs. "Bring all of it." Eliza didn't hesitate. She grabbed her leather satchel, sweeping her precious vials and dried bundles into it. She took one last look at the dugout, her prison and her sanctuary. It was a tomb. She stepped out into the bright, dangerous moonlight, following the Comanche warrior into the unknown. They moved with a speed Eliza didn't know was possible. Tveta kept to the ravines and the shadows, avoiding the open plains where the moonlight would expose them. He moved with a liquid grace, the cradleboard seeming to be a part of him. Eliza, burdened by her rifle and her heavy satchel of herbs, struggled to keep up, her lungs burning. But she did not complain. She matched his silence, her own tracking skills, learned from necessity, serving her well. She stepped where he stepped, avoided the dry, brittle twigs he avoided. After an hour, he stopped, holding up a hand. He tilted his head, listening to the night. Eliza listened too. She heard nothing but the cicadas and the distant, lonely call of a nightjar. "Horse," Tveta whispered. "One. Coming. Fast." He pulled her behind a cluster of mesquite, his hand firmly on her arm, pushing her down. "Stay. Do not move. Do not breathe." He melted away into the darkness, moving in the opposite direction. A decoy. Eliza's heart hammered. She was alone. She flattened herself against the earth, the smell of dust and creosote filling her nose. Adam, on Tveta's back, was silent, sensing the danger. The sound of the horse grew louder, a frantic, pounding gallop. Then a voice shouted, "I know you're out here. Bishop, Croft's offered $100 for you, 100 for you, and 50 for the half-breed brat." It was Jebediah Stone. He must have doubled back, his tracker's intuition telling him something was wrong at the dugout. He was riding hard, his form a dark blotch against the starry sky, passing not 50 yards from her hiding place. Then, from the darkness to her left, an arrow hissed. It was a perfect shot. It struck Stone not in the chest, but in the thigh, sinking deep. The tracker screamed, a high C, thin sound, and toppled from his horse. The animal spooked, bolted into the night. Tveta emerged from the shadows, his knife gleaming in his hand. Stone writhed on the ground, clutching the arrow, his pistol lost in the fall. "Savage!" Stone spat, his face pale with pain and terror. She was with you." Tveta stood over him, impassive. "Where is Sarah?" he asked, his voice a deadly hiss. "Sarah?" Stone grunted, trying to pull the arrow out, only to scream again as the broadhead bit deeper. The whore. She's dead. Dead as dirt. I made sure." Tveta's body went rigid. It was a job!" Stone gasped, his eyes wide with panic as he looked at the stone-cold warrior above him. "Croft's orders. He said she'd gone native, said she was a stain. He paid me. Paid me to track her, to end it. Said the baby was an abomination. He wanted it gone, too. He wanted that deed." So it was true. Eliza rose from her hiding place, her rifle leveled, though her hands were shaking. Stone's eyes flicked to her. "You," he snarled. "You traitoress! You'll hang! You'll both hang!" Tveta raised his knife. "No!" Eliza shouted. Tveta froze, turning to her, his eyes blazing with a murderous fire. "He killed my wife. He's a murderer, Tveta, but he's also our proof," Eliza said, her mind working with a cold, desperate clarity. "We kill him, and it's just our word against Croft's. And our word means nothing." "Proof?" Tveta spat. "He just confessed," Eliza said, walking closer. "He confessed to murder on Croft's orders. The people of Prosperity Creek. They fear Croft. They obey him. But they are not all murderers. If they knew he hired a man to kill his own sister and nephew for water, they would turn on him." Tveta stared at her, the knife still raised. He was a warrior, and the man who had murdered his wife was bleeding at his feet. The prairie law was simple: blood for blood. "He bleeds Out, Taveta said, gesturing to the leg. He die. Soon. Eliza looked at the wound. The arrow had severed an artery. Stone's buckskins were black with blood. He was already shivering, his face a ghostly white. No, he won't, Eliza said. She dropped her satchel and pulled out a pouch. Not if I stop it. You save him? Taveta looked at her as if she were insane. I told you, she said, her voice hard. I'm a healer. I don't get to choose who lives and who dies. Not like him. She gestured at Stone. She pulled out a bundle of yarrow, the plant to stop bleeding, and a clean rag. We need him, Taveta. We need his voice. Stone was fading, his eyes rolling back. Help! Me, he gurgled. Please, I'll tell him. I'll tell him what he done. Please. Taveta watched, his face a mask of warring emotions, hatred, confusion, and a new, grudging respect. He lowered his knife. Eliza knelt by the man she despised and pressed the yarrow deep into the wound, packing it tight. She tore the rag into strips and began to bind it, her movements quick and practiced. The map, Stone whispered, his voice thin. In the locket. I was supposed to get it from her body, but your people came. I ran. I have it, Eliza said, not looking up from her work. It's safe. The bleeding slowed. Stone was unconscious, but his breathing was steady. He would live. Taveta said nothing. He ripped a long strip of leather from his own leggings and began to bind Stone's hands. He then, with little effort, slung the tracker over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. He adjusted the cradle board, checking on Adam, who had slept through the entire ordeal. My village is close, Taveta said. We take him. Then we decide. He turned and started walking. Eliza, her hands stained with Jebediah Stone's blood, picked up her satchel and her rifle and followed. The moon was high, casting long, sharp shadows. She had saved the life of her enemy to save the future of her new family. She didn't know what law she was following anymore, the settlers, the Comanches, or some new, desperate one she was writing for herself, one drop of blood at a time. The ground beneath her feet felt less like Texas and more like a foreign country, one where she was the only map-maker. Taveta's village was hidden in a fold of the high plains, a small cluster of hide lodges hunkered down by a stream that was, Eliza noted with a clinical eye, running dangerously low. The coughing sickness had arrived before them. The air, which should have been filled with the sounds of a busy camp, was hushed. The only sounds were the barking of dogs and the hacking, dry coughs coming from within the lodges. Their arrival caused an immediate stir. Women and old men emerged, their faces etched with grief and suspicion. Their eyes landed on Eliza, her pale skin, her settler's clothes. Then they landed on the bundle Taveta carried, Jebediah Stone, now conscious and moaning, and the cradle board on Taveta's back. A woman, her hair streaked with grey and cut short in mourning, approached. Her face was a mask of authority. This was, Eliza sensed, a woman of power. She spoke to Taveta in their language, her voice sharp, gesturing at Eliza. Taveta responded, his voice calm but firm. He spoke for a long time. He pointed to Adam, then to Eliza, and said the word puha, medicine. He then pointed to Stone and said, Croft. The woman's gaze, sharp as obsidian, turned to Eliza. It was not a welcoming one. You, she said, in heavily accented English. You, white woman, like her. She spat on the ground. She, bring sickness, now, you. She was Sarah, Eliza said, meeting the woman's gaze. She was Taveta's wife, and she didn't bring this sickness. Your scouts brought it back from a raid, or from a trade. You know this." The woman's eyes widened, shocked at Eliza's bluntness. "I am Tosahui's widow. I lead here. You speak soft." "My medicine doesn't speak soft," Eliza replied, exhaustion making her bold. "Your children are dying. Your people are sick. I can help. I saved him." She pointed to Adam, whom Tveta was now unwrapping and passing to a younger woman, who cooed at him, her eyes wide with wonder. "He is Adam," Tveta announced. "Son of Sarah. Son of me." He then looked at Eliza. "This is Nawia. She is his healer." He did not use the word wife. He had given her a name. It meant provider. Tosahui's widow looked at Eliza, then at the still feverish baby, and then at the hacking coughs echoing from the lodges. Her pride fought with her desperation. "Show me," she said finally. For 2 days, Eliza worked without sleep. The sickness was whooping cough, a terror to infants, and it was compounded by malnutrition from the failing stream and the scarcity of buffalo. She set up a sick lodge, isolating the worst off. She boiled water, forcing hydration. She used her willow bark for the fevers, but her real weapon was a tincture of sundew, a plant she had carefully hoarded to ease the violent, breath-stealing coughs. She worked side by side with Tosahui's widow, respectfully incorporating the elder's own remedies, a soothing tea from slippery elm, a poultice of sage. She didn't dismiss the Comanche medicine. She added to it. She taught the women to boil their water, to wash their hands. On the second day, a child who had been blue and limp began to breathe easier. On the third day, the coughing in the camp began to subside. Eliza, covered in grime and sweat, finally sat by the stream, her hands shaking from exhaustion. Tveta sat beside her. He had been guarding Jebediah Stone, who was tied, hand and foot, in a small, isolated tipi. "You did this," he said, gesturing to the quiet, healing camp. "You are Nawia." "They're not safe yet, Tveta," she said, splashing the gritty water on her face. "The sickness will pass. But the other sickness, Croft, he's still out there, and he's damming the spring." Tveta nodded, his face grim. "My warriors return tonight from the hunt. They will want war. They will want his blood." He gestured to Stone's teepee. "War won't work," Eliza said. She pulled the locket from her shirt. "This is our weapon. Not guns, not arrows. This." She opened it and showed him the map. "Sarah, your wife. She was smart. This isn't just a map. It's a deed. It's a white man's paper. She was going to register it in the county seat at Tascosa. She was going to use the white man's law against her brother." "Law?" he scoffed. "There is no law. Only Croft." "There is," Eliza insisted. "The settlers in Prosperity Creek. They follow Croft because he promises them safety and water. But he's not providing water. He's hoarding it. And he murdered his sister for it. They are settlers, Tveta. They are farmers. They won't follow a man who murders his own family and steals the water he promised them. They'll fear a drought more than they'll fear you." A plan was forming in her mind, a terrible, dangerous plan. "We don't need a war party. We need an audience, and we need a star witness." Tveta understood. He looked toward Stone's tipi. "He will not speak for us." "He will," Eliza said, her voice turning to ice. "He will speak for himself. He'll speak to save his own miserable skin from the noose he deserves." She stood up, her body aching, but her mind clear as a bell. "I need to talk to your prisoner. And then we are going back to Prosperity Creek. But we are not going to attack it. We're going to liberate it." Tveta looked at this, small, exhausted woman who had, in 3 days, saved his son, healed his village, and now planned to take down the most powerful man in the valley with nothing but a piece of paper and a murderer's confession. He finally understood what his wife, Sarah, had seen in the white world. It wasn't just cruelty, it was a different kind of strength, a strength of paper and words and a law that, if wielded correctly, could be as sharp as any lance. "Moonrise," Tveta said, standing. "Tonight, we ride. You, me, and him." He looked at the healing camp. "You have given me my people back, Naubia. I will help you get your home back." "It was never my home," Eliza said, looking at the setting sun. "But maybe we can build one. For him." She nodded toward the lodge where Adam was, finally, sleeping peacefully. The return to Prosperity Creek was nothing like her flight from it. This time, Eliza rode a Comanche war pony, swift and sure-footed. Tveta rode beside her, Adam strapped securely to his chest, the baby's dark eyes wide, taking in the world. Behind them, 2 of Tveta's most trusted warriors, silent as shadows, led a 4th horse. Slumped over its saddle, his hands tied to the horn and his feet bound beneath, was Jebediah Stone. He was weak, feverish from his wound, but alive, and terrified. They did not ride to Eliza's abandoned dugout. They rode straight down the main, dusty track toward the center of the settlement. They rode in the open, under the rising, fat, silver-dollar moon. The town was on edge. Men with rifles stood guard on the boardwalks. When they saw the small party, a cry of alarm went up. "Comanche! It's the Bishop girl! She's with 'em!" Doors slammed. Rifles were cocked. In seconds, Silas Croft emerged from the saloon, which he'd co-opted as his headquarters. He was flanked by a dozen armed men. "Eliza Bishop!" he boomed, his voice rolling across the empty square. "You are a traitor to your blood. You come here with these savages to declare war." "We come here for justice, Silas," Eliza called out, her voice clear and carrying in the night air. She and Tveta halted their horses 30 yards from the armed men. "Justice!" Croft laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "There's your justice!" He pointed at the noose that hung permanently from a cottonwood tree in the center of the square. "That's for you, and for them." "That noose is for a murderer," Eliza said, her voice ringing with an authority she didn't know she possessed. "But it's not for us. It's for you." A murmur went through the townsfolk who were now peering from windows and doorways, drawn by the confrontation. "Lies!" Croft roared. "She's been tainted. She's a squaw. Seize her!" His men hesitated, their rifles trained on Tveta, who sat his horse, immobile as a statue, his face unreadable. "Before you start a war, you can't win, Silas," Eliza said. "You should ask your tracker where he's been." Tveta's warriors roughly pulled Jebediah Stone from his horse and threw him onto the ground. He landed in the dust with a wet groan. Croft's eyes widened. He had presumed Stone dead. "Jebediah? He's lying, Mr. Croft," Stone whimpered, clutching his wounded leg. "Tell 'em, they made me." "We made you do nothing, Jebediah," Eliza said, dismounting. She walked, alone, into the open space between the 2 groups. She was weaponless. All eyes were on her. "We just healed you, so you could tell the truth." She turned to the townsfolk. "You all know me. You know I live alone. You know I keep to myself. But you also know I am a healer, and I buried my family in this cursed dirt, just like many of you. I have no reason to lie, and I have no reason to love them." She gestured to Tveta. "But I found a baby, a dying baby, left in the dust, and I helped him, because it was the human thing to do. "A savage brat," Croft yelled. "His name is Adam." Eliza's voice cracked like a whip. "And he is Silas Croft's nephew." A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Croft's face, in the moonlight, turned a mottled, furious red. "She's insane!" "Am I?" Eliza walked toward Stone. "Tell them, Jebediah. Tell them who Sarah was." Jebediah Stone was weeping now, a pathetic, broken man caught between a noose and a Comanche knife. He looked at Croft's murderous gaze, then at Tavetta's cold promise of vengeance. He chose the crowd. It was Sarah Croft," he cried out, his voice cracking. "His sister, the one he said went to St. Louis. She never left. She married him." He pointed a shaking finger at Taveta. They had the baby, and she had the deed, the real deed, to the Sweetwater Spring. She was gonna register it for her husband and her son. "Lies," Croft bellowed, raising his own rifle. "He paid me!" Stone screamed, the words bursting out of him in a torrent of fear. "Silas Croft, he paid me to hunt her, to kill her and the baby," he said. "Cleanse the family line," he said. "Secure the water. I shot her. But his people came. I ran. I didn't find the baby. The square was dead silent. The townsfolk were no longer looking at Taveta. They were looking at Silas Croft, their protector. "This filth is lying," Croft said, his voice shaking with rage. "He's a coward." "Then where is your sister, Silas?" a voice called from the crowd. It was Mr. Henderson, the blacksmith. "And why are you damning the spring?" called another. "You said it was a temporary shortage. You've been rationing. My crops are dying." "He murdered his own blood," Eliza said, her voice dropping, yet it carried to every ear. "His own sister, for land, for water. Your water." She walked back to her horse and took the locket from around her neck. She held it up. "This was Sarah's. This is the deed. The true deed. To the Sweetwater Spring. It belongs to her son, Adam. It belongs to the land, not to one greedy man." Croft, seeing his power, his entire world, disintegrate in seconds, snapped. He let out a roar of pure, animalistic rage and fired his rifle, not at Taveta, but at Eliza. He was fast, but Taveta was faster. Taveta had launched himself from his horse, pushing Eliza to the ground, taking the bullet himself. It struck him high in the shoulder, a solid, sickening thud. He grunted, falling over her. Before Croft could fire again, a shot rang out, but it wasn't from the Comanche. It was from Mr. Henderson, the blacksmith, his hunting rifle smoking. Silas Croft looked down at the red, blossoming stain on his own chest. He looked at the faces of the townsfolk, their expressions a mixture of horror and cold, hard judgment. He collapsed in the dust of the town he had built on a foundation of lies. The karmic retribution was swift. It was final. Eliza scrambled out from under Taveta. He was clutching his shoulder, blood pouring between his fingers. "It is nothing," he grunted, but his face was pale. "It's not nothing," Eliza said, her healer's instincts taking over. "You're bleeding. People of Prosperity Creek," she shouted, standing up. This man, just saved my life. Your leader just tried to murder me in cold blood. We have a choice, right now. We can have a war, or we can have water." The tension in the square was a physical thing, a held breath that could explode into a massacre, or sigh into peace. Mr. Henderson, the blacksmith, slowly lowered his still-smoking rifle. He looked at the body of Silas Croft, then at the wounded Taveta, who was being tended to by Eliza, her hands already pressing a wad of cloth against the wound. He looked at Jebediah Stone, sobbing in the dirt. Finally, his gaze rested on the baby, who, startled by the gunshot, had begun to cry from Taveta's chest harness. Get him inside," Henderson said, his voice gruff. He motioned to Eliza and Taveta. "To the clinic. Doc Peters died last winter, but it's clean." He then pointed at Stone. "And lock that in the sheriff's office. Someone cover Mr. Croft." The spell was broken. Several men, their faces grim, moved to do as he said. They did not look at Taveta's two warriors with hatred, but with a new, fearful respect. The immediate threat was over, replaced by a suffocating uncertainty. Eliza, with Henderson's help, got Taveta inside the small, defunct doctor's office. She lit a lantern. The bullet had gone clean through the fleshy part of his shoulder. It was painful, but not fatal. As she sterilized her knife and heated a branding iron to cauterize the wound, she spoke, her voice low and steady. "He's right, you know," Henderson muttered, watching her work. "Croft, about them. They've raided us, killed my cousin." "And settlers have raided them," Eliza said, not looking up. "They killed my family with bad whiskey and a false promise of a farm. This place, it kills everyone, Mr. Henderson. Croft used that. He used our fear of them and their fear of us. He fed it, until he got so hungry he ate his own." She pressed the hot iron to Taveta's wound. He stiffened, a low grunt escaping his clenched teeth, but he did not cry out. The smell of seared flesh filled the small room. "Now, we have a choice," Eliza continued, bandaging the wound with clean linen. "That spring, it's dying. Croft damned it, yes, but it was already low. The drought. It's not enough for your town and his people. Not if we fight. A war will poison it for everyone." Taveta, his face slick with sweat, looked at Henderson. "My people do not want war. We want water. We want our children to live." "So do we," Henderson said quietly. "The deed," Eliza said. "The deed is the key. It belongs to Adam. He is both. He's Croft's blood, and he's Taveta's blood. He is the owner." A plan, born of desperation and a fragile hope, formed in her mind. An hour later, she stood on the steps of the clinic, the locket in her hand. The entire remaining population of Prosperity Creek was gathered. Taveta stood beside her, his arm in a sling. His two warriors stood behind him. "This map," Eliza announced, "is a legal claim, filed in Austin by Sarah Croft's father, long before any of us came here. It entitles the bearer to the spring. It belongs to Adam." She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Their water belonged to a Comanche baby. "But a baby cannot manage a spring," she continued. "So I propose this. We form a council, a water council, one appointed by this town." She looked at Henderson. "And one appointed by Taveta. They will manage the water. Together, we will tear down Croft's dam. We will share what is there. A day for the town's irrigation, a day for the tribe's herds. We will share, or we will all die." It was a radical, impossible idea. "Share with them?" Taveta spoke. My warriors will not raid your herds. We will hunt north in exchange for the water and for Nawia to trade her medicine." It was an alliance, a treaty, not between governments, but between two desperate groups of survivors, forged in the moonlight by a woman who belonged to neither. It took weeks. There were arguments. There was mistrust. Jebediah Stone was sent to Tascosa under guard to stand trial for Sarah's murder. The town, leaderless, elected Henderson. Taveta became the de facto leader of his recovering band. Eliza became the bridge. She lived for a time in the clinic with Adam. She taught the settler women her herbal remedies and learned from Tosawi's widow, who now treated her with a grudging, profound respect. The dam was torn down. The spring, now called Adam's Spring by some, and the spring of two peoples by others, began to flow more evenly. The two groups, settlers and Comanche, began to meet, not with guns, but with goods to trade. It was not friendship. It was a fragile, guarded, and necessary coexistence. One evening, months later, Eliza was at the spring, kneeling by the water, testing its flow. The moon was rising, just as it had been that night. She heard a soft footfall behind her. It was Taveta. He was holding Adam, who was now a healthy, chubby baby, gurgling at the moon. He stood beside her, looking not at her, but at the water, their shared lifeline. "You are not my wife," he said. Eliza's heart tensed. She stood up, brushing the dirt from her skirt. "I am not, Taveta. I am your partner. Your Nawia," he nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "When I asked for your hand, I asked for a mother for my son. I asked for a healer for my people." He looked at her, his dark eyes clear in the moonlight. "I did not get a wife. I got a leader." He shifted Adam in his arms. "He is safe. My people are safe. Your people are safe. Sarah would be proud." He held out his hand. Not for her hand in marriage. He held it out, palm forward, in a gesture of shared respect. An alliance. A peace. Eliza looked at his hand, scarred and strong. She looked at the baby, the living symbol of their new world. And she placed her own hand against his. It was a bargain made not of desperation, but of strength. She had found her place, not in the white world or the Comanche world, but in the small, hopeful patch of dirt she had built between them. The Wild West was built on stories of conflict, of heroes and villains, but the true, real-life stories were often messier, written in the spaces between. The story of Eliza Bishop, Taveta, and little Adam isn't one of simple love or simple hate. It's a story of survival. It's about the impossible choices a person has to make when caught between two worlds, with a baby's life in the balance. It's a story of how a woman, armed with only her knowledge and her courage, faced down to tyrant and forged a new future from the ashes of murder and mistrust. These are the stories that history almost forgets, the ones that prove that courage isn't always about the gun you carry, but the hand you're willing to offer, and the hand you're willing to accept. If this story of grit, betrayal, and a mother's unlikely bravery captured your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who loves a powerful, real-life drama. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We have so many more true, unspoken histories to share with you,